the President of the Senate, Your Excellency, the Deputy President of the Senate, leaders of the Senate, distinguished senators, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Babatude Fashola. I am a legal practitioner, a Nigerian by birth, and a senior advocate of Nigeria. I am 52 years old, and except perhaps to state my name for the record, I don't think that there is anything I could usefully add to my CV. And indeed, all of what may be in my CV is already in the past. But today provides a humbling opportunity to appear before this distinguished House in response to a call to national service from the President of Nigeria, nominating me to serve our country. I present myself today seeking your confirmation and offer my unalloyed support to the government of Nigeria in pursuit of the Nigerian dream and the Nigerian project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues. The nominee, let me start by saying congratulations. No doubt you are quite successful as a governor, but you are sure you are aware that federal level is a different kettle of fish. So I have two questions for you, which I believe you'll be able to deal with. The first is the issue of VAT administration. VAT. Possibly Nigeria has the lowest VAT in the sub-region. As governor of Lagos State, and with the dwindling economic situation in the country, what will be your advice in terms of the level of VAT that should be VAT, value-added tax, that should be charged by the government of Nigeria, and how do you think that that VAT should be appropriately be distributed in view of the provisions of the Constitution? The second is the issue of security challenge. As governor of Lagos State, I'm sure you have sleepless nights on how to manage the security situation. There have been this argument of the decentralization of policing in Nigeria along federal system of government. As a lawyer and a former governor, what would be your suggestion regarding the decentralization or otherwise of the police system in Nigeria vis-a-vis the need to enhance the security situation in the country?
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman. My name is Barnabas Gemade. I represent Benue Northeast Senatorial District. Mr. Nominee, former Governor of Lagos State, let me add my voice also to the DSP, congratulating you for your nomination by Mr. President to be a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You are the immediate past governor of Lagos State, one of the most populous states of Nigeria. A large population concentrated in relatively limited space, full of creeks and low-lying levels of land. At the time you became governor, Lagos was regarded probably as one of the most difficult cities to live in Nigeria, and indeed probably in Africa, because of the level of congestion on its highways, and to some extent the relative squalor in many sectors of the city due to poor sanitation and such matters. A little bit in your tenure, people who rushed into Abuja began to make preparations to move back into Lagos. And it was reported that Lagos had become a much better city. And obviously, I believe there's something that you did in that city. Abuja is the image of this nation today. It's beginning to have its own mega city problems. In your own opinion, what do you think you can add to decisions and policies of government that you are going to belong to ensure that Abuja does not get to anything near what Lagos was? And if at all there are problems, what you can do to support the quality of this city as the best image that we expect it to give for this country. Thank you.
Senator Mohammed Ezen Nazir. And then Nazir Bauchi North.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Suleiman Nazif, and I represent Bauchi North. Let me start by welcoming the ministerial nominee to this distinguished Senate. Mr. Babatude Fashola, SAN. Indeed, you are a determined, well-accomplished Nigerian. You have excelled tremendously as the governor of Lagos State. How would you assess old generation politicians and leaders vis-a-vis younger generation politicians as leaders concerning economic development and political development in Nigeria? Please respond. Nigerians would want to hear from you how you related with so many Nigerians, how you interacted, and how you view the two sets of Nigerian leaders. We wonder how you are stable and how you stabilize Lagos, bearing in mind the complexity of Lagos State. So please respond.
Senator Ina Baribe.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Ina Baribe. I represent Abia South. Mr. Nominee, I have just two questions for you, very simple questions. Number one, did you really build a website with 78 million and also sink a borehole with more than 300 million? Two, one of the biggest problems we have in this country is the question that always arises between those who come into office through support from their bigger brothers. And I would like to know, Mr. Nominee, what is your concept of loyalty? Thank you.
Mr. Fashola, you take those four questions.
I will start in the order in which the questions were presented. And to say first, in line with all of the work that took place in Lagos, to say generally that I could not ever attempt
to personally take credit for the work that you have commended about what happened in our state. It was a team effort. There was pioneering work by all of those who served before me. And it is a continuing effort. And so it would be extremely inappropriate and immodest of me. And indeed, they wouldn't let me if I attempted to appropriate personal responsibility for all of what happened. As far as value-added taxes are concerned, they are what they are, taxes for adding value. And so they are first taxes that generally seek to stimulate production, improve economic activity, and so on and so forth. So those who benefit from it must essentially contribute to it. Secondly, because it is a form of consumption tax, we must also understand that there are limitations to how vast its application should be. And generally, food items, baby things, and all of those things are excluded from it. And in the main, many economies have used it to, as it were, redistribute incomes and reduce inequality by taking more from those who consume high-end products, luxury products. So, specifically to the question, I don't have scientific basis to say today that there is an argument for increasing the value-added tax. And I think before we decide to increase taxes, we must first optimize the capacity to collect what is in place. One of the things we did in Lagos was to increase the number of people who were contributing to the Commonwealth instead of seeking to increase the number of taxes that we levied. And so, between 2007 and 2015, the number of people who were paying taxes grew from 500,000, who were bearing the burden of the whole state, to 5 million. But our numbers show, in the population of about 21 million, that there were 9 million plus or minus people earning income in the state. So there's still scope for collection of taxes from close to at least 4 more million people. In that sense, the burden of managing the state becomes lighter when the responsibility is shared and spread. So I think first, before we decide whether we are taking up the VAT or we are reducing it, is to look at where we are today and what mechanisms we can use to stimulate collection. Today, online technology is a very versatile tool for tax remittance, for payment and settlement of bills. How we migrate to those platforms very quickly for government work and all of those will probably help in that sense. Because one of the disincentives that we saw initially, as successful as it was, asking people to go to a bank to pay, because we wanted to reduce interference of public servants with cash, helped. But after a time, it became cumbersome, and we had to look for new ways in which to encourage them to make payment cost-effective and also comfortable. As far as distribution is concerned, I think one of the ways in which we can stimulate the economy of this country, at this moment when there is a need in any event to diversify away from oil, is to encourage productivity and to allow the states who generate the most in terms of these taxes to keep as much of them. Competition has always been known to stimulate productivity. And as much as I can say that I haven't probably traveled all of the 36 states of Nigeria, the knowledge and information available suggests to me very clearly that there is no state in this country that is unable to undertake some form of productive activity. Whether it is from milling rice in the most rural areas, whether it is processing cocoa, whether it is timber processing. So those kind of multiply activities support the growth of industries and are capable of happening across the nation. Yes, some states may be disadvantaged in terms of their level of development, but until we are in a position to say, let us make tough choices, let us encourage this to happen,
because of tomorrow, rather than seeing today, the incentive to produce will not be there. As far as security is concerned, that is the primary purpose of every government. It is the purpose for which government exists, to protect its citizens and their assets. And it is the toughest job that any government can have. It is a challenge that leaders across the world are facing. Terrorism, youthful gangs, cults, and so on and so forth. So, my attitude was to see criminals as my competitor. And in a competition, my desire was to win. And to use my resources to outspend the competition, outthink the competition, and outmaneuver the competition. But our risks are different. As a governor, my job was to ensure that nobody died. My job was to ensure that nobody robbed. So I had no margin for error. Every citizen that was robbed, I had failed that citizen. So I had to be right every time. The criminal had to be right only once. But even when the criminals were right, what was important was to demonstrate to our citizens that we weren't without solutions. And many of the incidents that happened, we were able to resolve, bring the criminals to justice, and that put a lot of confidence in the citizens. Now, this was an architecture that we didn't own. It was a federal government architecture, a federal police arrangement. But at the time, they operated without enough guns. They operated without enough uniforms. They operated without protective vests. And they operated sometimes without vehicles to even respond. And where there were vehicles, there was no fuel. In my interactions with them, these were the first things that came out. And it was clear to me that this was not going to be something one person could do. So we brought all of the stakeholders in, the banks who were being robbed on a daily basis then, without a capacity to respond. And one of the things I told one of the bankers was, look, listen, if you can protect and bulletproof your bank, if you care about your workers and your customers, can we bulletproof every home? If we bring some of these monies and we put them into a pool and give these policemen, it will probably help us. And so, the point, sir, is that there is a necessity first to decentralize. The numbers available to me is that we have probably a standing police force of about 500,000, less than 1 million in any event, to a population that is heading towards 180 million. So we are under-policed. And even if the federal government decided to take on this responsibility on its own, could it really do so in the micro level that is necessary at the state, at the local government, and all of those levels? My recommendation is a compelling urgency for decentralization. I have made those recommendations in some of the committees on constitutional amendments where I was privileged to make representations to you. There have been arguments about all of why we should not go there. But with respect, distinguished senators, those arguments do not go far. They do not address the fundamental responsibility that government has. I have had arguments that governors will abuse the police for political purposes. With respect, sir, the abuse for political power is not as important as the loss of life. That is our primary duty. And everything we do to advance that cause makes us more respected as a government that cares. And there's a process for curing abuse of institutions. But there's no process known to me today for recovering back life that is lost. And those are the choices that are before us as a people and as a nation. Now, at the state level, you can perhaps only wonder what governors are going through. They have parliaments that make laws, but they have no capacity to enforce their own laws. We are talking about women issues, rape, domestic violence. They are criminal offenses in many states and across the country. But who is prosecuting them? Because the police officer is too busy chasing a robbery. So our mothers, our daughters, and our sisters are expected to tolerate rape. Now, if we are afraid of abuse, one of the things that I have said is that let us start the state police working with the federal. There's a position that I have presented on it, but I do not want to take inordinate time. I proposed an arrangement where we had 6 zonal commands of the existing police force. States who want to run state police, and not every state should start if it can't fund it. Today, for example, I draw this quick analogy that the law on income tax is a federal law, but it empowers state governments to collect. And we can have those kind of amendments without perhaps necessarily going through a full constitutional amendment. States who now want to start, and our tax levels are different states, at different levels of development across the states. So if you want and you can fund it, you can say, for example, I want to employ 1,000 graduates into the police force of my state. The curriculum for training them is a national curriculum. I send them to the academy. The Police Service Commission or whoever is responsible then says, look, only 800 met the requirements. We graduate them. They are your employees. States buy their own uniforms. There's a national licensing. So Lagos can have LA, whatever, for numbering. Kaduna can have KD. And we can even limit the initial jurisdiction and scope. There's no reason why they can't wear the same uniform. We color them with different badges, so we know it's a state police. We've seen it in the city of London. Their uniforms are essentially the same. It's on closer look that you will know that one is Metropolitan Police, one is City Police, one is the other police. If we did this, it would seem to me first that we can address first unemployment of young graduates, policing their own communities. We would need to make uniforms. Tailors will be busy. Buttons will sell. Boots, and so on and so forth. We can then even limit the jurisdiction if we are so afraid that state police can start with things like domestic violence, rape. I don't know the last time any serious conviction for rape was made in any of our high courts. But there are issues that affect our mothers and our children. Traffic, sanitation, the fundamentals to our well-being and our longevity is not the number of hospitals that we have. It's wellness, living healthy. Oh, these are things that police can deal with at this thing, and each state will progress at its own pace. So I recommend that we decentralize, and I will go quickly to Senator Gemade's question that I must confess that my knowledge of Abuja is not as deep as my knowledge of Lagos. I've lived all my life in Lagos, so the privilege to lead the government of Lagos State came with the added knowledge. But life is a continuous process of learning. I think one must salute first the vision of the founders to conceptualize a new capital for Nigeria, even though it hurt at the time, because there are standing issues about the role of Lagos in terms of support. But I think Abuja is about twice the size of Lagos, almost 8,000 square kilometers, and the last census, I think, was recorded Abuja as about under 1 million, but I'm sure those numbers, even if Abuja was 2-3 million people sitting, the question is how many millions of people come in every year. And in deciding what to do about Abuja, those are the real issues. First, getting a hold of his resources and his assets, knowing his districts and their problems. I know a few of them. I know Yanya, I know Lugbe, I know Garki, I know Maitama, of course, and so, but really and truly, city management, state management is a function of harnessing all the resources, knowing who the people there are, and convincing them, sharing with them what the thoughts are. The master plan itself may perhaps need to be reviewed. And that is the interesting thing about plans. Plans are not static documents. They are dynamic. They must be reviewed periodically. And so a level of consultation and knowledge will be necessary in order to accurately say this is where Abuja should be headed. But there are so many things that can be done. In spite of of our complaints, it's still a beautiful city. Getting it to be better than it is a matter of choice for all of us too. Laws will have to be enforced. Actions must have consequences, and planning must be rigorously followed. And in all of this also, as we do that, recognizing the need to include people who live on the fringes of society. Even as a people, we depend on a lot of support staff, drivers, cooks, and so on. Do we build in our houses to accommodate them? Or do they live in satellite and unplanned towns close to us so that they can get to us to come and serve? Those are issues that planning, I think, will help to do. Distinguished Senator Nazir, you asked me about old politicians and young politicians and how they relate to the economic development of Nigeria. I think the sum total of every nation is its people, really. And the more elderly one clearly are the more matured ones. They are our guides and compass for life. And in the way that children see life through the mirror of their parents, they must guide the process. They must lead, and no matter how hard really we try, we could never discount the experience, the maturity, the counseling, and the guiding support of people who are older than us. In my own right now, as just a 52-year-old person, I am an old man as far as some people are concerned. So we must continue to interface with them. And I would walk away from the tendency to condemn the level of our national development. I will walk away from that tendency. It is not something that appeals to me. Because in all of what we see, many of our leaders, many of our early politicians have done very defining things in the history of this country. Perhaps we expect too much sometimes from mortals who are supposed to act as our supermen and our superheroes. But I remarked to somebody yesterday that coming through the southern gate of this complex, I now have fuller appreciation of the work, the vision that it took to build it at the time that it was built. And I ask myself today, what if we wanted to rebuild this? Could we afford it now? Perhaps there will be controversies and all of that at the time. Perhaps there will be debates about whether it was too much to spend on a parliamentary building. But here we are. And in the foreseeable future, I think this building typically will compete with Capitol Hill and will be here for centuries. But it was one of our leaders. And so all of the groundbreaking things they have done, starting national television, it is our responsibility to continue to add value when we find ourselves in a privileged place and to take on the foundational work that they have done. I remark, for example, that how could we have contained flooding if the governors before me did not design master plans, if they didn't start to build? So we must take the whole together, and in the fullness of time, we will reach the desired level of development that we seek. But I urge also that we must continue to see our glass as half full rather than as half empty. Distinguished Senator Abaribe, the simplest questions often turn out to be quite the challenging ones. But let me say first that it raises the question about public understanding of the role of governors, of the role of public servants, and some people have been surprised to learn that as governor of Lagos State, I don't know about other states, I don't sign checks. None of my commissioners signs checks. I have never signed a check. I don't fix contract prices. It's an institutional process. The only training I have is that of a lawyer. But in order to execute a civil works project, we need the input of architects, we need the inputs of quantity surveyors, we need the input of structural engineers. There's a process, and we have consulting ministries. For civil works, it is Ministry of Works. For science and technology, it's Ministry of Science and Technology. For environmental drainage and so, it's a combination of Ministry of Environment and Works. Now, periodically, they do market surveys with the Ministry of Economic Planning, the statisticians there, and fix the price of every item, from biro to iron rod to cement. It is approved, and that is the benchmark price for government procurement. Nobody can award any contract over that benchmark price. I don't sit in awards of contracts. There's a state tenders board, and later a procurement agency enacted by law. And immediately the law came into force, we dissolved the state tenders board and handed over. But throughout my tenure, I had been confronted from day one with the price of this and the price of that. And all I have always said that is the realities are that when you design a road, what you meet in reality when construction starts is probably not what you end up with. I recall a road we awarded in Ajegunle, and from design, all we saw was an earth road that needed to be built with pavement and all of that, and tarred. When the contractor went to site and did not deliver on time, and I complained, he said to me that, I think you should come and see what I'm dealing with. What we assumed was a solid surface was actually 1-point-something meters of refuse embedded under the ground that had been dumped over the years. And so, of course, they had put laterite on it. That if I build a road for you this way, the road will collapse in no time. So first, our contract projections had to change. We had to bring him back to retender for evacuation. That's work for people, to remove the refuse. Trucks had to be hired. Then we have to replace with soil to build the road back to the level before the normal things that we assume to happen. So if I had told you at the beginning that that road cost 10 naira and later we finish it at 15 naira, the unfortunate thing about money really is that it always raises suspicion even amongst brothers. I mean, the likelihood is that if your brother tells you that he forgot or he has lost the key to your car, you are unlikely to think that he stole your car. But if he told you that, oh, the 10 naira you gave him, he doesn't know where he put it, the first suspicion is probably bought something, he's taking my money. So it raises suspicion, but truth be told, all of these things, nobody has alleged that I have corruptly enriched myself. And I couldn't be the master of all of computers, technology. I need something to do my work. And you make procurement in Senate. Who knows how much, who is involved in how much you buy biro and stationery? And as for loyalty, the concept of loyalty is a very strange concept. You see, I always say that when loyalty is to be tested, the real answer, sir, is that may our loyalties never be tested. You know why I say so, sir? In the course of my work, there was a family that had a parent who had a kidney malfunction. And diagnosis was that the patient needed a transplant and needed to go overseas. We had a procedure in government where we helped people, indigent people who applied, to get a board review and get overseas treatment. When we had paid and they were to go, the question was who was going to be the donor? It turned out that the only matching kidneys were those of her 2 daughters. And none of them was willing to give a kidney for their mother. But that was their supreme test of loyalty. So I always pray that my loyalty will not be tested. Because you do not know, when loyalty is, you may have to take a bullet for somebody, for even your own child. And so perhaps we discuss it loosely, but in public life, I have remained loyal to causes that I have signed on to. And all my life, really, nobody can fairly accuse me of giving my word and going back on my word. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Can I get something where to wipe the sweat? Okay.
Am I protected?
Go ahead, Central. You, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Babatude Fashola, SAN.
Order.
You are one Nigerian that for sure many people have very keen interest on. And this is rightly so because you govern one of the most populous states in this country. Now, I recalled at the beginning of your service to that state, there was the issue of what you yourself tagged as the shame of a nation. And I think that was the issue having to do with the traffic gridlock in Oshodi area. You stepped in and somehow that phrase, shame of a nation, was changed to what I think all of us will agree, pride of a nation. And I recalled, for me, my very first experience when that happened. And I had cause to leave Abuja to Lagos for an official assignment. I was taken through a route that I was initially very skeptical. But I think at the end of the day, it took me less than 10 to 15 minutes to get to VI, Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, then. Now, what I want to ask here is, given the scale of issues on ground and what you have to do, either behind the scene or policy-wise, to change the face of that area, you are coming to a larger scale to be the Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. What, in your experience, given that particular intervention you've done as governor, can you bring to certain issues that we rightly in this country are bothered about? For example, the issue of infrastructural decay. You are a son, and we all know when it comes to funding of infrastructure, there are issues. There are other issues having to do with something you have mentioned in your previous response on this floor. That is the issue of domestic violence, for example. I want to tag all of this to how do we value life in Nigeria? Because we have situations where all manners of things happen People die.
Distinguished colleagues and distinguished Senator Yusabi, I would like to put the question.
All right.
So that.
So the question I want to ask here is, what will be your take on how we value the life of our citizens in this country, and what intervention do you think, given the change our party is, promising Nigerians to bring with respect to this particular issue, the value of life in Nigeria? Thank you.
Senator Usman Nafada, Gombe North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Usman Bayero Nafada. I represent Gombe North. Mr. Nominee, let me also join my colleagues in congratulating you. And I have only one question. As a senior advocate of Nigeria, you may likely be posted to the Ministry of Justice. And our problem today, one of our problems, where corruption has gone deep in our system, is Ministry of Justice, vis-a-vis the judgment dates. Year in, year out, the judgment date is always filing. And if you look at what they are doing in the Ministry of Justice and compare it with the judgment date, even a layman can discover that these huge sum of money in billions that they are claiming as judgment debt may not be true. If you are posted there, how do you intend to handle that issue? Because it is a serious issue. Thank you very much.
Senator Sam Egu.
My name is Dr. Sam Egu. I represent Ebonyi North. Let me join my colleagues in congratulating you. As a governor, you did very well. And you remember that even as a Minister of Education, I came to Lagos State and appreciated your efforts in the education sector. Now, as a Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, considering the paucity of fund, the dwelling income coming into the national coffers, and the pyramid of problems facing the country, it's not possible that the government can tackle all of them at the same time. Considering your experience as a governor and a member of the Executive Council, Federal Executive Council, what would be your advice to the government in terms of prioritizing the areas of intervention? At least first 3 areas you think the government should face to make a maximum impact considering the paucity of fund. My second and last question is, as a governor of Lagos State, we are not just the governor of Lagos as a geographical entity, but as governor of the citizens that comprise Lagos State. Considering the plurality of this state, and again, considering the fact that the constitution of this country emphasizes that the primary function of a government is the welfare, protection, and security of its citizens. As a governor of Lagos State, there was a time you assembled destitutes and repatriated them to their various states of origin. And that generated a lot of controversy. Can you please explain to us what must have informed their decision or your action, considering that you are a governor of the citizens, of the people of Lagos State, irrespective of their tribe or state of origin? Thank you very much.
Senator Thompson Sekibu.
Your Excellency, Chairman, I am Senator George Thompson Sekibo, Rivers East Central District. Mr. Nominee, I have so much interest in you. So much because I am one person who don't like going to Lagos because of what happened to me in 1989, 1990. I was in Lagos from the airport to the hotel I was to sleep. I spent 6 hours. And from that period, I found it difficult to go to Lagos. But today, I go to Lagos regularly on weekends. Instead of staying in Abuja, where we have some confrontation. What do you do there? Of course, you know what I go to do. Now, I've also keenly followed up your administration and I've observed so many things. I am asking because whatever experience you got in that place could be transferred to the federal government, to the whole Nigeria, and then we improve upon it. I knew when you started with your government in Lagos State, your IGR was lower. When you concluded, it was huge. You may give the figure if you want, but what is the magic? What magic one did you apply? Can that be brought to bear in this country, in the whole Nigeria?
That's not what we wanted. What of his debts?
That is one. The second one is the issue of stealing of petroleum products in the riverine areas of the coastal states. And Lagos is one of the coastal states. Do you agree with me that lack of filling stations in among the riverine communities is one of the causes of illegal refinery? If it is, how do we solve it? If it is not, and people are just stealing oil anyhow, because it is bringing down the national income, what advice will we give that we will all agree and follow up to minimize it? Finally, as a member of the Federal Executive Council, I know that we are going to be part of major decision. Going to be part of the major decision that government is going to take. Do you think, or do you believe that the war against the Boko Haram insurgency could be won? If yes, what are the foreseeable factors you can analyze for us to know that it is possible that this war will be won before the end of this 4 years tenure by the change government? Thank you very much.
Mr. Fashola, I can answer this question.
Thank you. The distinguished Senator Sano asked about Oshodi and what knowledge that can bring to bear in the development of Abuja and of course the nation. I think the thing to say simply is that we must decide for ourselves what quality of life we will accept. And I think that this country has recently demonstrated that it can change anything that it does not like. And I think that is the attitude. And so it's not the function of any one man or any super minister, or it must be the function of a team. When we went into Oshodi, we had a unanimity of position about crime, about diminishing property values. People were selling their houses and moving away. About healthcare issues, and so on. So it's the same attitude that we must have in order to turn our country around. Infrastructure funding, yes, again, we have to make choices. Some of the choices will ultimately come before this House. If we have an annual budget of a little over 4 trillion and we are consuming a recurrent portion of it of about 70-something to 80%, we can't fund infrastructure. It will seem to me that those are the choices that we need to make if we are convinced that we need to upgrade our infrastructure. And I agree with the view that not only do we need to upgrade our infrastructure really is behind. And every investment that we make in infrastructure really helps to grow the economy. As Senator Nafada asked about judgment debts, well, I'm not able to conclude that judgment debts grow either because of corruption or only because of it. I think that the point to make also is that what is the nature of cases in which judgment is signed against government? Were there cases that government should have defended in the first place? Were there cases that government should have settled and perhaps maybe paid less? And even when those judgments were given, did they have interest components on them? Did we brazenly breach contracts? And if judgments accrue interest, did we pay on time? And the figures will continue to go. And so, some of the things that I think we need to do is to first say that what kind of cases are we paying judgment debts for? Was it the acts of public officials who acted in violation of their institutional authorities? Was it because we cancelled a contract that we signed or we breached it? And so, for me, it's a question of good governance, really, at all levels, to ensure that government discharges its role, does not get involved in needless disputes, and when it gets involved in disputes that it can win, it is right. Whoever is the Attorney General should lead the charge to go and defend vigorously the claims against government. And wherever government and the Attorney General in this case forms the view that this is an unmeritorious case to defend, it will be honorable and dignifying in the finest traditions of the bar to concede the claim, negotiate the cost, settle it, and move on. Again, analogous to the question of funds that distinguished Senator Egu asked, is how really do we raise money? What are we producing as a nation? What is our deficit? What more can we earn? What can we earn in the short term, in the medium term? Yes, there is talk about private sector. There are also places where we are spending money that we need not spend money. There are places where we can move resources to address what is our urgent need. But the choices that we make will define the results that we get. I think that we can make better choices. I think that this is the time to make those choices, to spend more on infrastructure, road, water, hospitals, trains, to get our economy back on track. And I dare say also that this nation has a lot of money outside the country by Nigerians. We are investing more outside our country than we are in our country. And in terms of posturing, it doesn't send a good message about us. And the time also has come to review the strategy even for recovery of money that has been identified as ill-gotten wealth that is locked up in vaults outside the country. What is the strategy that we have pursued over the last 14, 15, 16 years? How much have we spent and how much time have we spent in pursuing that strategy? And what results have we gotten? Can we borrow from some other nations who have used innovative but yet lawful means, something perhaps analogous to plea bargaining, to say, let all of this money come back into our country and come and work for us? These are some of the things I would look at. In addition, of course, people must pay taxes. They are certain in a democracy as a basis for representation. And those who want to benefit from the Commonwealth must contribute to the common purse. About the question of detainees, I think that there is unfortunately a misunderstanding of the issues at the time, and also there was a political atmosphere that made it difficult for rational appreciation of what the facts were. We didn't just collect destitutes. I think it is also important to say for public information that we were taken to court, and if I recollect correctly, the court found no merit in the claim. And the basis for making that determination was that these were people, all sorts of people from across Nigeria who come, sleep on the streets. Some have psychiatric problems, some are sick, some are dying. We take them into a home. We look after them, we treat, we rehabilitate, and then some of the pressures we begin to have, I want to go home. Where is home? The only information we have about where home is what he tells us. We stood the risk of also being accused of illegal detention. And in all those instances, we corresponded with the states that those people claimed that they were from. I think Senator Akpabio, as governor, has also written to me, sending people from his state to me. I didn't make a hue and cry about it. We verified those who were indigenous to Lagos, and we told him that these are not indigenous to Lagos. And in a federation, sir, the right to free movement is not an absolute right. It also carries with it the responsibility not to be a nuisance. And we owed that obligation first to rehabilitate, and so on and so forth. And as I said at the time, for those who felt truly offended, I made a public apology. But it was not a matter of just going to pick people. The state who they claimed wrote back didn't get to us. There was proof that we sent letters to them. And I would hope that we would let the matter go. I apologize again in the interest of national cohesion, that we must not expand those fault lines. We must be brothers and sisters. Distinguished Senator Sekibo, welcome back to Lagos, sir. And, but there's no magic about IGR, and I think for the safety of time, I think I have indicated some of the issues there. Everybody must pay their fair share so that they can have their this thing. As far as petroleum products and filling stations are concerned, again, it's a business that perhaps I have no skills about, so it's not easy to say this is why that happens. But we need to diversify, and how we distribute our petroleum. We need to secure permissions. We also need to help vulnerable people live a useful life.
Mr. Fashola, before you rush on, this is a very gender-friendly chamber. I will let Senator, that's where I will ask you final question.
Order.
Binta Masi Garba, Adama North, Adama State. So you've said a lot and you've covered virtually. Talked about security, you talked about infrastructure, you talked about economics and what have you. We have a manifesto, sir, and it's a contract with the Nigerian people. And I'm happy the chairman of our great party is here. 2 million houses, 3 million jobs to be created, a stipend to be given 5,000 naira to the unemployed Nigerians or to the poorest of the poor. With all that you have done in Lagos State, which obviously is a pride to every Nigerian. And one of the cardinal things I think I was about to get from that, I remember there was an advert before the election where our leader in the person of Bola Tinubu came in and had a vision, put it on a template. When he finished his 8 year, he gave it to you, and now when you finished, you gave it to Ambody. That means there's a continuous process of policy to see a new leader.
Senator Binta, can I ask you to put the question?
The question, sir, is the manifesto of the APC. How will you put those promises made by the party to the Nigerian people to see that actually that promises will come to pass in terms of housing, job creations, and even social security nets to the people? Thank you.
That question.
Thank you, distinguished Senator. I think that the consequence of some of the things that we have been talking about, revamping our infrastructure, increasing security, and doing all those things that we need to do, will ultimately and consequentially respond to the commitments that we made in our manifesto. They follow inexorably once we stay true to our purpose. Construction work of roads will lead to jobs. For construction companies who employ people, they will lead to jobs for vendors who supply materials. They will ultimately bring down the cost of living, because roads mean efficient transportation. Efficient transportation means efficient, cheaper cost of doing business. Housing construction inevitably will have the same consequence. It will be our responsibility as a government to then begin to measure the impact and to have a common purpose that every project that we undertake must respond to those issues. The choice whether we do A or B is a question of whether it creates work. It's a question of whether it creates work, whether it expands the opportunity, whether it helps the vulnerable and the weak in our economy, and whether it gives them an opportunity to feel included in the economy of their country and of their respective states.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just also, because we're a gender fair, I'll just allow on the side, Senator Jimmy, I know we have the genders on both sides of that. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. Nominee, let me congratulate you on your erudition and your rounded views about governance. However, I'm taken aback that in Lagos State, your IGR is 23 billion. Your local debt is 408 billion. And your foreign debt is $1.17 billion. And that was at a time of buoyancy. Now you're coming to the center at a time when oil revenues have almost gone to the dust, and there is need for diversification. And we cannot keep taking debts from states into the federal coffers. What are you likely to do differently? And how are you going to assist this government to ensure that we don't pile debts and we're not in deeper trouble than we are right now? Thank you very much.
Distinguished Senator Olujimi, I think that the point first to make was that the budget of Lagos State, if I remember correctly, in 1999 was under 20 billion naira per year for 20 million people. It was an unsustainable budget. And so my predecessor in office, Governor Tinubu, first addressed resource raising IGR. Now, I think that perhaps our perception of debt today is a reflection of debt that we accumulated as a nation, and perhaps for which we do not have full appreciation or full value for money of what we did with the money. But my position, very simply, is that where we are today, it is difficult to conceptualize a short-term view that will not include borrowing if we want to keep this economy going. The economy needs a stimulus. We must borrow. Our infrastructure is behind, and if we don't invest money in our infrastructure, we can't grow the economy. So the notion of debt as a sin is something, or something evil, is something that I would urge that we review and revisit. Where is the money going? If we want to build rail lines across Nigeria, we are not going to fund it by cash in our pockets. Rail tracks last for over a century. And so, the project that we commit to financing by borrowing must not only be bankable and economically productive, it must be able to outlive the useful life of the borrowing. Now, as far as the borrowings are concerned, let me first say for clarification, the foreign debts were not all the foreign debts that the state on its own contracted. First, some of them were contracted by the federal government on behalf of the state. Some of the FADAMA projects and all of that, we didn't contract them individually as states. There were projects, of course, that we took as subnational government. More importantly, our administration did not accumulate all those debts. Some of them we met from governments even before 1999, because many of those foreign loans have tenures of 40, 30 years. And we continue to pay them. Now, credibility of a nation, of a state, really is not how much cash it has in the bank. It's how able it is to finance and pay its debt and remain credible and creditworthy. The rating of the state today by Fitch is the highest rating any government in Nigeria, subnational government, has. Now, some of my colleagues who appeared here yesterday have alluded to the example of the United States. The global benchmark for debt to GDP ratios are about 20%. Our debt to GDP ratio is about 3.5%. We are well below the threshold. The United States is owing $16 trillion or $19 trillion now, but they decide what happens across the world. I would like to be that kind of debtor. Changing governments across the world. We go to their universities, we use their hospitals, we travel to their wonderlands. That is what they've done with their money. That is the kind of debt we should have. A debt that grows our productivity, that grows our might, that grows our nation. But I am not a debt man. But I am simply trying to explain the concept of debt in financing public infrastructure. But we can't borrow to pay salaries. We can't borrow to run generators. I would rather, instead of borrowing to run generators, borrow money to build a power plant that reduces our overhead. So those are my top of the line concept about it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Fashola has taken question from over 11 senators and gives us now for 10 minutes. Is it the wish of the Senate that the nominee takes his leave now? Yes. Mr. Nominee, you can take your leave.
So there we have it, the first nominee for the day, former Governor Babatude Fashola. And it's very nice to note that he has set a benchmark now of over an hour, taking on questions on the economy, but specifically on Lagos State. And he dealt with questions on his management of the affairs of that state, of the economy of that state. And he now leaves he leaves the chambers right now. Haven't set the ball rolling for the 10 nominees that are lined up today. Spent a lot of time, more time than the first person spent yesterday. Senator Udodoma, who came in, spent less than 20 minutes and went out. Today, the first person spent in an hour, and it makes you wonder how long the next person was spent.